The soft hum of the hotel air conditioning did little to cool the tension in the room. Damien Blake, billionaire, best man, and emotionally unavailable, stood frozen in the doorway of the bridal suite, his designer luggage still in hand, his jaw ticking ever so slightly. Across the room, sprawled across the edge of the plush king-sized bed, sat Ariel Monroe, curvy, radiant, and undeniably the bride's best friend, with a towel wrapped around her head and a smirk tugging at the corner of her full lips. Damien muttered under his breath as he pulled out his phone, trying to make sense of the situation, double-checking the room number. Ariel replied sweetly, unbothered, informing him that the resort had overbooked and there had been a mix-up. They were stuck together, at least for the night. Damien's mind scrambled. This weekend was supposed to be a formality, attend his oldest friend's wedding, give a tasteful speech, and fly back to his penthouse in Manhattan without forming any unnecessary attachments. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. Because the woman in front of him wasn't just any woman. She was fire and laughter and curves wrapped in confidence. She wasn't intimidated by his money or charmed by his arrogance. She challenged him just by existing. And somewhere, beneath the surface of his carefully composed life, something stirred. It started with one room. It wouldn't end there. The morning after the wedding, Manhattan felt colder without her. Damien Blake stood in his penthouse apartment, his coffee growing cold in his hands. The city buzzed below, relentless and alive, but he felt still. Since Ariel flew back to New Orleans, something inside him had shifted. He wasn't the same man who lived for quarterly reports and stock value. No, he was the man who now stared at his phone, rereading her last text. Ariel had said she was back in one piece and that New Orleans missed him, and so did she. He smiled, his thumb hovering over the screen before he typed back that he was booking a flight and would be there by Friday because he couldn't go another week without hearing her laugh in person. That weekend, New Orleans welcomed him with jazz on the streets and the smell of powdered sugar in the air, but nothing compared to the warmth of Ariel's arms around his neck at the airport. She wore a vibrant yellow sundress that hugged her like it had been made for her alone. Her curls were pulled back in a loose puff, and her smile practically lit the terminal. When she whispered, "Hey, New York," he pulled her close and whispered back, "Hey, home," holding her just a second longer. The next few days blurred in a symphony of discovery. Ariel took him to her favorite hidden cafes, introduced him to her friends, and laughed every time he butchered the names of Creole dishes. But the real magic came at night, when they sat barefoot on her porch, sharing stories under the stars. She told him about her late father, a jazz saxophonist who taught her how to dance in the kitchen. He shared how his mother raised him alone after his father walked out, and how he learned not to trust easily. With each revelation, a new thread tied them together. One night she told him he was softer than he pretended to be, and he teased that she was louder than she pretended not to be, before kissing her fingertips. 2 weeks later, it was her turn to visit him in Manhattan. He transformed his cold, sleek penthouse into a space of warmth and life, filled with flowers, candles, and her favorite playlist echoing through the halls. She arrived wearing jeans and a silk blouse, wide-eyed at the skyline view, and joked that he really did live in a Bond villain's lair. He pulled her close and said the only thing missing was the villain. That weekend, he took her to the Met, rooftop jazz bars, and even a private dinner atop the Empire State Building. But Ariel, ever grounded, found just as much joy dancing barefoot in his kitchen. They slow danced to an old Marvin Gaye record, her head resting against his chest. And when he whispered that she was ruining him, she looked up and simply said, "Good." But love isn't without friction. The scandal broke one Thursday morning. Blake Industries under fire for an environmental violation. Though Damien was 2 degrees removed, the media feasted. Paparazzi hounded him. Investors grew cold. His phone didn't stop buzzing. Ariel saw it online first and immediately called, telling him she was flying out. He told her to stay put, his voice tight with stress, but she insisted, saying it was exactly why she needed to be there. When she arrived, his lawyers glared disapprovingly. Her presence, they claimed, was a distraction. But Ariel never blinked. She stood by him at the press conference, hand in hand. When a reporter mocked their relationship, asking if she was just another headline, Ariel stepped forward with a calm but firm voice and said she wasn't a headline. She was his piece. It went viral in minutes. And Damien, watching her fall asleep on his couch in one of his t-shirts that night, realized he'd never loved anyone like this before. Not even close. 3 months later, on a surprise trip to Aspen, they curled up by the fireplace while snowfall blanketed the world outside. She murmured that she had never asked what happens when the high wears off. He told her it wouldn't. She teased him for being bold. He said he didn't need bold. He needed her. Then he asked if she believed in soulmates. She looked at him, long and searching, and said she didn't. Not until she met a grumpy billionaire who shared his hotel room with a girl who steals all the blankets. He laughed and replied that he didn't share blankets. He surrendered them. She kissed him slowly and said good. They kept exploring each other, the world, and their future. In Mexico, they swam in cenotes and danced until sunrise. In Morocco, they got lost in the Medina and ended up riding camels under a velvet sky. Damien surprised her with a handwritten letter in every hotel room. Ariel started journaling their journey. By spring, they had moved in together. Half her things in Manhattan, half his in New Orleans. One morning, as she buttered toast in his oversized robe, he told her he was going to marry her. She arched a brow and asked if that was a proposal or a threat. He grinned. Just a spoiler. The Amalfi Coast shimmered beneath the golden Italian sun, cliffs wrapped in bougainvillea, and the scent of lemon groves drifting through the salty breeze. Ariel stood on the balcony of their villa, a silk robe fluttering around her thighs, eyes soaking in the cerulean sea. Behind her, the soft clink of china and the warmth of espresso hinted at Damien's quiet breakfast routine. She called him to come see without turning, and he stepped behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist, murmuring that somehow the view just got better. Ariel laughed softly, leaning into him. These last few days had felt like a dream. Lazy mornings, scooter rides along the coast, candlelit dinners under stars too ancient to name. It was the first time in a long while she felt entirely free. Free to be in love. Free to be vulnerable. She teased him about acting strange before coffee, and he said maybe it was jet lag, or maybe it was that he was crazy in love with her. Before she could answer, he gently took her hand, saying there was something he'd been waiting to do. Her heart stumbled as he knelt, right there, on sun-warmed tiles, with the sea sighing below and the wind brushing her curls. Damien Blake held out a delicate ring set with a golden diamond, framed by tiny sapphires. He told her he had been to boardrooms, to battlefields of business, and through lonely skyscrapers, but never understood home until he shared a room with a woman who stole the covers and stole his heart. Her eyes welled with tears as he said she had grounded him, challenged him, loved him without needing to fix him, and that he wanted to dance in kitchens with her at 80, wanted their children to grow up hearing her laugh. He asked her to marry him. She laughed, cried, and nodded all at once. Yes, of course, yes. They kissed amid cheers from the villa staff below, one even tossing rose petals from the balcony above. The wedding was planned not with extravagance, but with intention. Ariel insisted on New Orleans because if she was giving her heart away, it had to be where it first learned to beat properly. Damien agreed without hesitation. It took place in a historic courtyard surrounded by jasmine vines and gaslit lanterns. String lights hung above the guests, swaying gently as jazz floated in the air. Her gown was classic ivory, cinched at the waist, with off-shoulder sleeves and a cathedral veil that fluttered like poetry. Her hair was in soft curls pinned with fresh gardenias. Damien, in a tailored midnight blue tux, waited at the altar with his heart in his throat. When Ariel stepped into view, the entire crowd hushed. She looked like she belonged to every song ever written about love. He whispered, "Wow." She smiled, eyes brimming, and told him she cleaned up nice. Their vows were raw and real. Damien said she once told him he was her peace, but the truth was, she had been his fire too. She burned away every wall he built. Ariel replied that he had been her mirror. He saw every curve, every doubt, every strength, and loved them all. He made her believe she could belong to someone without disappearing. As they kissed, sparklers lit the evening sky. Tears and champagne followed. Their first dance was under fairy lights, barefoot, with Ariel giggling when Damien missed a step. For the honeymoon, Damien whisked her away to Bora Bora. They arrived at an overwater villa surrounded by aquamarine water. The bedroom had glass floors, so they could see fish swimming beneath their feet. Every morning, breakfast was served in a canoe. Every evening, the sun turned the world into fire and honey. They spent afternoons snorkeling, reading on hammocks, making love with the door open to the sound of waves. But the most cherished moments weren't grand. It was him braiding her curls with his clumsy hands. It was her humming while tracing his chest, half asleep under white linen. It was Damien writing her love notes in French, even though he only knew 5 words. On their last night, they lay side by side on the deck, stargazing. Ariel asked if he ever thought about how insane this all was, that he was just a name on a place card at someone else's wedding. He reminded her that she was a girl with too much luggage and too few cares to give. They both laughed. Then she turned serious and wondered, what if she wasn't always enough? He reached for her hand, kissed her knuckles, and told her she was never supposed to be enough. They were supposed to grow enough together. Ariel swallowed the lump in her throat and said it was terrifying. He said it was beautiful. She smiled and said, "Okay, then let's grow." Back in New York, their life took root quickly. Ariel launched a creative media firm focused on curvy representation in fashion. Damien, now unshackled from his need to be the cold CEO, invested in startups led by underrepresented founders. They were partners not only in love, but in impact. On a lazy Sunday morning, Ariel felt strange, not sick, just off. She took a test, not thinking too much of it, but the second line appeared almost instantly. She stared at it, blinking, then smiled so wide her cheeks hurt. That evening, she cooked his favorite, lemon risotto, and handed him a small gift box over dessert. Inside was a onesie that read, "Future Boardroom Boss." Damien looked from the box to her glowing face. "Are you serious?" he asked. She nodded, tears threatening. He stood and gently cupped her face. "A baby," he said, his voice breaking. "With you?" "Yes, with me," she replied. He kissed her slowly, reverently, whispering against her lips that he didn't think he could love her more. But he was wrong. They danced right there in the kitchen, their laughter echoing down the hall, already making space for a new chapter of their love. The nursery was a dream in soft sage green and warm creams, with stenciled stars on the ceiling and a custom rocking chair nestled near the window. A hand-painted mural of a sleepy elephant cradling the moon wrapped around one wall. Ariel's idea and Damien's surprise execution. 7 months pregnant, Ariel stood at the doorway, one hand on her growing belly, the other holding a glass of almond milk. Damien crouched on the floor, assembling the final piece of the crib, tongue sticking out slightly in concentration. She teased him about never thinking she'd be attracted to a man using an Allen wrench. He glanced up and smirked, claiming he'd built empires with less complicated instructions. She stepped in and pointed out that he had just put the drawer in upside down. Damien stared at the crib, then at her, saying he'd buy another one. But Ariel laughed, belly shaking, and told him no. He was going to fix it, Mr. Billionaire. Their home was no longer sterile marble and minimalist artwork. It was filled with textures and life, bookshelves with her poetry and his business journals, a kitchen table always cluttered with half-written ideas and crumbs from late-night snacks. Aromas of cinnamon, vanilla, and roasted garlic often drifted through the air. Damien had softened into his new life beautifully. He wasn't just the husband who sent roses and booked exotic vacations, though he still did. He was also the man who rubbed her swollen feet without being asked, researched prenatal yoga classes, and read every book on fatherhood twice. Ariel, meanwhile, glowed. Her body changed, and instead of hiding, she reveled in it. She wore fitted dresses that highlighted her curves and her bump, proudly posted mirror selfies captioned "creating life and slaying" while doing it. Their love didn't just blossom, it bloomed wildly. On their anniversary, Damien flew her to a secluded cabin in the Rockies. It was snowy, silent, and perfect. He cooked her a candlelit dinner while she rested in front of the fireplace. Later, he pulled out a photo album he had secretly made, filled with pictures from every phase of their journey: hotel room selfies, beach strolls, her laughing over spilled coffee, him kissing her belly when he thought she was asleep. She whispered that he documented everything, clearly touched. He replied that he never wanted to forget how they got here, and he wanted their child to know it all started in a room they didn't want to share. They kissed under twinkle lights, snow falling outside. It felt like time paused for them. When Ariel went into labor, Damien nearly fainted in the hospital lobby. He told the nurse she was only 37 weeks, pacing nervously. The nurse, unimpressed, replied that it was still perfectly safe, and told him to sit down before he needed oxygen. Ariel, for all her fierce independence, was surprisingly calm. She said she was more scared of him panicking than she was of giving birth. 12 hours later, after tears, screams, and a delivery playlist featuring Beyoncé and Etta James, Damien held his daughter for the first time. She was tiny, brown-skinned with a wisp of black curls and lungs that could shame a trumpet. Ariel, exhausted but glowing, said she was perfect. Damien kissed her forehead, his eyes wet, and told her they both were. They named her Nova Blake, a name Ariel chose because it meant new star. That night, Damien whispered that she was the best thing they'd ever made, but Ariel would always be his first miracle. The days that followed were a gentle chaos of midnight feedings, lullabies, spit-up, and swaddling. But through the exhaustion, there was joy, a constant stream of it. Damien would sneak Ariel's favorite smoothie into the nursery while she nursed. Ariel would leave post-it notes in Damien's laptop case with messages like "You're doing better than you think." They grew as parents, as lovers, and as friends. Every diaper disaster was a lesson. Every 3 a.m. cry brought them closer. One morning, Damien watched Ariel sleeping, Nova tucked against her chest, a beam of sunlight hitting both their faces. And that's when he wrote her a poem. It wasn't polished. It wasn't even very good. But it was raw. You shook my world in silken curves, in laughter, light, and quiet nerves. You made my steel heart bend and glow, and now you're all I need to know. He left it on her pillow with a daisy and went off to prepare breakfast: eggs, toast, and 24 strawberries sliced into hearts. 6 months later, they returned to New Orleans for a family gathering. Ariel's mother held Nova in her arms, crying, saying she looked just like Ariel did as a baby. They hosted a celebration in the same courtyard where they were married. Jazz played, children danced, and Damien, now completely at home in this vibrant life, played dominoes with Ariel's uncles while holding Nova in a baby wrap. One uncle teased that he didn't think Damien would last this long, calling him City Boy. Damien grinned and replied he didn't either, until he met Ariel. That night, after everyone had gone home, Damien and Ariel lay on a blanket in the backyard. Nova slept nearby, wrapped in her favorite duck-printed blanket. Above them, the stars shimmered. Ariel asked if he ever missed his old life. Damien thought for a moment. The money, the boardroom rush, the solitude. Then he answered no, because all of that was just noise. This, he said as he reached for her hand, this is the music. She smiled, leaned over, and kissed him long and deep, whispering that it was corny as hell. He grinned and reminded her she still married him. They both laughed, then fell quiet, holding hands as their baby sighed in her sleep beside them. And in that simple, tender stillness, they knew they'd built something unshakable, Not perfect, not glossy, but real. Warm, fierce. A love that grew and would keep growing forever. Thank you for watching. Please don't forget to subscribe, like, comment, and share. Bye. See you in our next